All right. I am here with Christy Brown, the CEO at Dr. Noze Best. How's it going, Christy?
Hey, it's good, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm excited to kind of get into some tactics and things to expect. But before we get there, I'd like to kind of start with your background and how you got here. If you could share more on that, and then we'll start unpacking the rest.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I tend to do this when I'm asked this question and it feels like a 30-minute conversation. So I'll try to be brief and tell you the whole truth. I am an engineer turned entrepreneur. And I honestly never really thought I'd end up in venture or exits, but I did. But I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. And so it wasn't unique that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. My I had a single mother who was an entrepreneur and built things, but more importantly, my grandmother was one of the first women in the Atlanta area that did kind of man's work back in the day. And what I mean by that is she was a commercial developer and real estate entrepreneur, and so I watched her scale businesses, and so my background really wasn't intended to jump in and build businesses as much as going to school and figuring out what job I was going to land in. It just so happened that over time, I grew quite a few companies and had, a few exits across different industries and just had some learned experiences. But that's genuinely my background is coming from that family where I watched other people with grit and intention really drive towards building a company. I will tell you, and I haven't thought about this before, so this will be unique for your show. It just popped in my head. It was unique that my family was growing a family business versus a business to exit. And it dawns on me today when I think about it, I grow companies to scale and exit. And so that's pretty much been my background, and unintentional or not, that's where I've landed. So it's in businesses that keep thriving.
Nice. And what was the family business? Like, what was that initial business that you got exposure to?
Yeah, so my grandparents had a commercial development and a real estate company. So they did development and real estate investment trust and things to build both commercially and homes. They also had a home building business as well. And then they had a brick and mortar business that also sold spas and things like that were renovated in bathrooms. And I would say across my cousins, every single one is an entrepreneur. There's 7 of us, and only one, my sister, is actually an educator. She went a totally different direction. So again, it didn't dawn on me that I was going to move from engineering into entrepreneurship, but it just so happened that was where my direction was. And I learned very early on through becoming a consultant right out of university that it just wasn't the world for me. I didn't want to be in a box doing the same strategic items and under their rubric. I wanted to, explore and color outside the lines. And so that's how I developed my first business.
Nice. And I think that something unique about that type of family business as well is the amount of trades people and individuals that you interact with who are also entrepreneurs. You're
Yeah.
literally interacting with probably a dozen regular tradespeople that were working with your family to help with the properties and stuff like that and building and everything.
Yeah.
And that is like a crash course on its own of like not only your family, but seeing how other people do it. And I can see how there's a lot of different lines of education there. That's really kind of a cool course. So what was the first kind of venture success that you saw when you were
Yeah.
starting?
Yeah. So I built a company that was very early days of e-commerce. So we built a strategy and development company that supported Fortune 500 companies with their pursuit of the customer journey. And so in these companies, what we did was consult with them on what it would take to really identify and develop their customer persona and how to talk to them online. So this was, back in the, like I said, early days. So 2002, 2003. And that was the first company that I built and scaled.
Nice. Very nice. And now, I think let's do a high level as to where you are now, because
Sure.
you got a lot of experience around accelerators, and that is near and dear to me, having gone through an accelerator once upon a time. And I think that maybe people that are listening aren't familiar with that world. I know many are, but there's probably half the audience that don't know what that is. So if you could kind of walk us through your experience with accelerators and what that means.
Yeah, that's a great question. So an accelerator is typically for intended towards an early stage company that, is looking for support to build and scale. And an accelerator is exactly how it sounds. It's intended for a unique cohort of companies that come in for a period of time, and it exposes them to true customer discovery and some of those terms you may not know right now, how to build an MVP, how to pivot, how to really dive in and get to know your business, what customers will pay for. And, if your business is investable. Many accelerators are really targeted towards companies, hopefully you'll agree with this, Steve, that are going to head out and raise money. And so it gives venture preparedness as well. And so that's really the exposure to accelerators for me. And I think, even with our business, we've gone through accelerators, and I've also built accelerators. So it's, it just depends on what your business needs and if that particular expertise within that particular accelerator would be a benefit for your business.
Yeah, and I think an ingredient that a lot of people don't talk about with accelerators is just being around like-minded fellow entrepreneurs
Totally.
is
Yeah.
is incredibly powerful. Incredibly
Yeah, I
powerful.
agree with you. I'm shocked I left that out because that peer-to-peer learning and peer-to-peer osmosis, if you will, is just irreplaceable. I probably talk to a new founder every single day, and I bump in. We sit inside of an incubator because, frankly, I don't think they want to kick us out because I'm so happy there, and we don't need tons of office space. So why spend money on it? But I bump into a founder every day that's trying to figure out kind of their way and how to accelerate their company. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not always how it's who and bumping into those peers in an accelerator is just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a truly important ingredient. When I was going through one, I heard people saying like, this is the first time I've ever felt like I fit in somewhere
Yeah.
where you're kind of the outlier when you're coming up with ideas and trying to build things all the time relentlessly. And people are
Yeah.
like, what are you doing? But I think there's so much value to that, especially with like what you mentioned, pivoting, having people that you enjoy, they're your peers that you respect, telling you like, hey man, this is the wrong direction. You need to go here.
Yeah.
And there's just so much value there. So you built, I believe it was like a CEO for women school, right? It was like
Yeah.
a school to help. What was that? And can you walk us through how that started?
Yeah, so it was an accelerator as well, less of a school. So each year we would take a set of, a cohort, exactly like an accelerator. We would choose women that had venture ready companies that were CEOs. And really what our focus was to create venture prepared CEOs. Oftentimes, women have unique challenges to men as far as founders. They're not confident. They say more no's than yeses to raising money. And really our edict was, how do we create a platform for women that helps them become the CEO they are intended to be with confidence, competence, financial literacy? Not that they're illiterate, just there's a certain exposure to financials when you're running your own business that isn't day-to-day balancing your checkbook, and giving them those tools is certainly help women face the challenges in their role that normally men may or may not see. So just really having them be ready. It was really, I didn't start the platform, we had a group of women around. And so I don't want to take this on as an independent owner a decade ago that realized this through our own angel investing. What we saw was there were no women pitching. So week after week, month after month, we would attend our angel investing sessions and there were just no women. And the plausible answer was they don't have the confidence to come pitch for capital, and let's go talk to these women, do our own customer discovery and figure it out. And that's exactly what occurred. And so over a decade, we graduated, I use that term, about 260 women across the Southeast ecosystem who had scalable companies. And it actually integrated over about 2.5 billion into the Atlanta ecosystem through jobs creation and scaling and revenue growth, real estate, things like that, because these women grew their companies and didn't back down and learn the tools that they need, and they continued to grow. So that accelerator would be a week long each year, but throughout the months, over 12 months of year, as they were members of this community, there were all sorts of tools. There were mentors, there were boards of advisors, there were things that were developed solely for them that allowed them to grow and have this founder mindset.
Nice. Yeah, and I think my take when you say like VC-backed CEO or VC-backed founder, a lot of people listening to this may not really understand what that means, but there's a certain mindset shift where when you have to grow at a certain clip that is seemingly impossible, and you have to, basically turn on the burn and get as many people in to help you build this thing as fast as humanly possible. It truly, regardless of male or female, it takes a unique perspective and mindset to do it and to not explode yourself. And I think it's such a great thing that you are empowering women to do that, because there's this concept that I've heard of on this podcast, like the napkin concept, where men are more likely to go into a room with a napkin and pitch and say like, hey, this is my idea, and wave it around with confidence and get a check. And I think that the more, as the father of a young daughter, I'm always curious as to how we can kind of instill that confidence and get women through the door earlier, to get those checks. And what have you seen as like milestones, or maybe not milestones, maybe roadblocks that are preventing them from going in sooner with more confidence? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think in my experience, it really always boils down to confidence. I mean, you just told the napkin story. I mean, you're spot on. It's us identifying, why don't we say more no's than yeses? Why aren't we showing up in the same rooms? And oftentimes women feel like they have to have 100% of the skill set or 100% of everything before they'll go pitch, versus, like you're saying, the napkin concept. Let me just throw the napkin in the room. I'm going to ask for, $1 million. Here's my business plan. Here's my milestone. They just walk in. Men typically just walk in with more of a competitive attitude. I think, I always go back to what kind of makes me click. And it's not always unique to me, but it is something I see. I've always been a competitive athlete. So that competition to me of hitting the milestone or hitting the number and competing is pretty important. But I also see that almost cut off as women start to grow their businesses, because they lose that confidence. They could be the same way, but if they're not confident with their financials, heck, I'm not confident all the time in my financials. We have to dig deep to get the numbers that I want sometimes. And I have to review them over and over and make sure I understand them. I'm not ticking and tying spreadsheets anymore. those are my deficiencies, but I also know where the experts are that I hire to create those things so that we do understand all of that. And, but I've also been the solo founder on the ground doing all that work myself and building and earning the right to be at that table before I could hire a team. So I've been on both sides of the equation, and it really is getting to that aspect of how do I articulate my business? How do I articulate the business? Do the investors understand? How do I show them milestones for their money return? Because that's what investors really want to understand. And, is this a plausible business with customers that are going to pay me for what I've created? Mm-hmm. And that's, kind of the bottom line, is having the confidence to really pitch that in a room. I think those are oftentimes barriers. And it's certainly what I see with not, male or female. It's what I see founders really be deficient in. And because we are ego-minded founders, and founders are ego-minded, you have to be willing to take criticism in a room as well, and that can erode your confidence. It doesn't mean stop. It just means, hey, we might want to think about a pivot or something different to make this business scale in a different way. So I think, when I think about roadblocks or how we do that to ourselves, we got to be willing to take the criticism a bit first, and then how do we turn that into an opportunity?
Mm-hmm. And it's such a unique characteristic, because at the same time you have to be careful as to which advice you
absolutely
take. So it's like this.
Yeah,
you got to kind of be, as everybody's talked about, you got to be a little crazy. You got to be like ignoring certain people and really being careful and not too agreeable with all the critiques. And you also have to take critical feedback in order to adjust and pivot and move. So it's like this really fun, unique mindset that very few people can have. So that's why I was curious about, the whole VC teaching to be VC backed, and it's kind of like giving people thick skin and telling them like, this is how you go about yourself, how you carry yourself, how you update investors, how you go into all these, hundreds of rooms with more than a napkin, but a desk. And,
maybe a pencil also.
Yeah. A pencil too. So I'm curious also with like transferability. I talk about that a lot. A lot of people have mentioned it on the podcast, but let's say somebody listening to this doesn't have a vision for how their business could be acquired or exit. What would you say in terms of advice?
Yeah, I always coach founders on, even myself, I have to start with the end in mind. It's really, I write down, as simple as it sounds, I constantly am creating pros and con lists. And I really write them down to see what I want it to be at a certain period of time. So the way I bite that off for myself is 2, 3, and 5 years. I tell founders to do it, especially in very early stage. Where should this be in 24 months? And then take a chunk of that and decide where the business is going to be, but what else matters? Is it family, health? Is it work? Freedom? What are you trying to strive for? Because you're going to have to reverse engineer yourself into what kind of business, and then further, what kind of exit that your life can sustain and support around that. Because, and you hit this in the previous comment, because you can get the business can run you straight into a burnout, and it really has to be aligned to support life. But further that business strategy in these increments. For me, like I said, I do it in 2, 3, and 5 year increments. Where do I want Dr. Noze Best to be in the next 3 years? What are the milestones that we're trying to hit? How many families, there's a mission here too. How many families do we want to save? And then, kind of reverse engineer that. And, but I also have to have the simplicity of living my life with my family. I can't do 24 hours a day like I did 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it becomes increasingly important to reverse engineer life around me versus business around me.
Yeah.
I hope that helps someone.
Yeah, it will. It will. And that said, it's a good transition before we get to the finale here. I want to talk about your exits because you have a few under your belt.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through those kind of in chronological order, like how it happened real quick and give us a high level there?
Yeah, I'll be as quick as possible. So all of my first exits were all professional service companies that I created. I started talking about the first company I built. I exited that to my partner. It was a match made in heaven, and it was fantastic to exit the company to him. Again, we had that plan I just talked about of what 3 years and 5 years should be. We were 3 years into the business. I wanted to travel the world and compete in triathlons. He was ready to keep growing. I was thrilled to sell my portion to him and have a little bit of money to support my lifestyle. I was very young, so it wasn't, again, a match made in heaven. The next exits were much more complex and complicated. They were much more driven through private equity, and I was one of many on the cap table. So it was really driving through what their plan was for us. And we knew that in 3 years we had to hit X number, and at 5 years was our time horizon on our exit. And our goal was to exit to a public company. And we did that. So across the partnership team, it was, several of us really bluntly driving that. And then my final exit was a similar transaction of I built a company and had the opportunity to exit it to a public company with an earnout. And it was actually a bifurcated deal, which made it even more complex. Because I had a sort of an engineering side of the business on that business that I exited to a similar professional service company, and then joined for my earnout for the next 4.5 years. And that's the look and feel. I do a lot of coaching with founders about what that looks like and what their goals might be. And an earnout is not something I would like to do in the future. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. Can be. It depends on the founding team. You just have to make sure that the other business across the table from you really fully gets who and what your business is and what that team dynamic will be so that it stays with you. Because you do change cultures when you transact a company exit like that. And having done it a few times, more than a few times, those culture dynamics can really change the look and feel of your company. So you're just really looking for the power of simplicity in your exit, which the complexity makes it messy. So I think, as I think about building businesses and other exits that I've done and investments that I have that have exited, it's really protecting the team and culture becomes number one for me during the negotiation now versus 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that because it's a good segue into kind of misconceptions around exits. I think that when you read headlines often of these huge exits, there's no fine print behind the scenes of it was actually
Right.
$1 up front and 100 million earnout. It's like a very unique thing that you only get through experience of going through an earnout and what that entails, what can change after the fact, what types of things you have control over that you don't have control over. And it's a great example of a misconception when it comes to earnouts. So what are some other ones that you've seen and you've come across in terms of misconceptions?
I'm going to give you a comparable. The misconception for an exit and the misconception for venture funding. And I thought about this as you brought the question up because they are similar. People think exits are super fast and glamorous, and as soon as you close, that the check hits your account. Same thing with a venture deal. People think, oh, it's fast and glamorous. We've got a great term sheet. The money will be in my account tomorrow, and I can spend it all. The reason that's such a big misconception is things come in tranches. And just like building your business in an exit, you have milestones. And if those milestones are not accelerated through your terms, then you may not have the financial reward that you are on path to receive or could have received by growing your company. I also think, or I know in my case, I think a misconception for me is that the exits fix the burnout or slow down my work. And it really accelerates oftentimes the amount of work in front of you. I had a peer friend that exited last year, and it was so fun watching him go through his exit. It was a huge exit. And he all of a sudden went from this, very intense, having grown the company for nearly 2 decades to this huge exit. And he was just so relaxed. And I was like, how are you like this? And he said, because I have a 1-year exit and the leadership team's already taken over and my time horizon is, my payouts are coming in my tranches and not my circus, not my monkeys. And I thought that's the exit that I should have had. Time over time, that would have been so great because they're emotional. And in reality, they take a lot of time and they can be somewhat anticlimactic because on a Friday, you may transact and close. On a Monday, you're in the new company being introduced to the leadership team and the rest of the organization has whiplash because they're like, we had no idea this is happening. Who are you? Why are we reporting to you? And you just have to prepare yourself mentally for what that looks like and your team. There's an emotional turmoil, certainly in the team. And I think the misconception, especially with not just early stage founders, growth stage founders that are exiting, but also with the employees. The employees, feel they have a connection to this company. And when you exit, they almost feel hurt that they didn't receive some compensation or that, they didn't have a particular interest in the company, especially if they were with you in the early days. So I think those are some of the misconceptions and why I typically go back to the power of simplicity now of making sure these negotiations are a bit more leveraged and that you're thinking more holistically about the path that your employees are going to be on as well.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. Well, that takes us to the finale question, and then I'll ask a bonus question afterwards. But
okay,
knowing what you know now, what would you tell Christy 10 years ago?
Oh, that's always so hard. I wasn't ready for that one. Let me think about that. That's such a hard one. I think I would say diversify, my early angel investments. Don't go for the $1 billion, unicorn. Look at the things that are more personal, where you can not just help founders, but you're really scaling and growing a company. I think that's one. More personally, ensure time that you're leveraging time day to day. I talked about starting with the end in mind and why I do things a certain way and why I have pros and cons. I think if I ever kind of, again, look back on a decade ago, what more could I have done to move faster through some of this? I would have told myself not to do an earnout. I would have negotiated that a different way. I would have gone into venture, some angel investing and venture funding a little bit sooner, I think. Just some different things I would have done personally. But I think that all comes down to none of us are here without great health and great attitude and great support systems. And, I think that those are some things I look back on and regret is not taking more time to be there for the most important things rather than being the CEO every day.
Mm. Well said. So the bonus question is negotiations. What tips can you give people for negotiating through an exit?
Gosh, there's so many. Well, first you have to operate under the reality it's not going to be an overnight transaction. It is a transition. And I think the sooner you think about what you want with your business, you should start having conversations with the people that help you get there, like investment bankers. I never shy away from meetings. We're not in an active process, but I certainly meet with our investment bankers each quarter to say, okay, here's what the business has done. Help me think about, what this might look like 3 years out. And, you know, I think that's having the right peer-to-peer network around you can help you avoid the pitfalls of transactions, even after the deal closes, to get to the life you're excited about. That's my couple of tips. Like, make sure you have the right people around you that are nurturing you as far as you can go. Don't be so prideful not to ask the questions, because I learn something every single day about this stuff, and I am certainly not an expert. And that you're in a transition, not just a transaction. And that means you're bringing people alongside with you. Mm-hmm. And remember, scaling is a strategy, but exiting is personal. And if you're a solo founder, or, you know, like in my second deal within a group of founders, it doesn't just pay you, it helps you understand what you might be doing next.
I like that. That's good. Well, those are all the questions I have. Where can people learn more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, I would love for parents to come see what we do, which is brilliant as a company, at drknowsbest.com. You can find me certainly on LinkedIn, Christy Brown, pretty easy to find. And, you know, I'd love to talk to anyone that has questions. I'm an open book, and I work with founders, and I am a founder, and I do it every single day, and it's absolutely a passion. And I grow because of that every single day. So you can find me pretty much anywhere on LinkedIn. Awesome.
Well, wherever you guys are listening, on iTunes or Spotify, the links will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on, Christy.
What a pleasure. It's so great to be with you, Steve. Thanks for the time.